going on, people? I am Swaver, and this is the Opinionated Facts Media Group podcast, the podcast to come to when we're talking about things that affect the community. And today's conversation is going to be about cervical cancer. We brought on a young lady, and she's talking about how she found out she had cervical cancer, how other people can find out if they have cervical cancer. And she talks about how she lived her day-to-day life with cervical cancer, being a mother, being a wife. And I think this episode could be very good for maybe someone that may be dealing with cervical cancer, just found out they have cervical cancer, or know of someone else that has recently been diagnosed with cervical cancer. So we're just reaching into our community, finding people with great stories that want to give advice to other people in the community, and we bring that to the light. So I missed this episode, but my team is on point. So you guys tune in, check it out. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Here we go.
What's up, everybody? I am Coco Love, and Swaver is not here today, so it's a little different. But I do have Journey to be Great, and I have Illuminated Lenses. Say hello.
Hello, everyone.
What's up, everybody?
All right, and we also have a guest with us here today, Lindsay. Say hi, Lindsay.
Hello, everybody.
Okay, so we are going to be talking with Lindsay today about cervical cancer as well as the importance of the HPV vaccine. So you guys listen up. So Lindsay, what makes this so important to you? What did you want us to get from this today?
It's very important for me to get the information out there about how important it is to get your children vaccinated with the HPV vaccination, because I was diagnosed November of 2023 with stage 3C cervical cancer, and it was HPV related.
Okay.
Oh, wow. And you said stage 3. So did you find out through like a routine checkup, or were you having some type of symptoms that made you get checked? How did that come about?
So I always say that my story started with bleeding. It was irregular bleeding. So I've always had a normal period every 28 days. It's never been outside of that. Most people say they have abnormal periods or irregular periods all the time. I was not one of those people. I was definitely a regular period type of person. So I knew that when the bleeding started, that it wasn't normal for me. And I took myself to the ER because the way I was bleeding was alarming. So I went to the ER, but I had just had my period a couple of days before. So when I went to the ER, they were like, well, everything's normal. Everything's fine. We checked and everything's okay. And they told me to follow up with my PCP. So I did that. And when I was telling her about me bleeding, she gave me a test for Graves' disease because I was telling her what kind of bleeding I was experiencing. And she said, it sounds like hypothyroid. So they tested me for that, which came back positive. But when I went to my endocrinologist for the hypothyroid, then I explained to her why I was bleeding. She told me that the type of bleeding that I was experiencing was not consistent with hypothyroid. So, eventually I saw my gynecologist, which I had already set up an appointment for a gynecologist, but it took forever to get into the gynecologist. And finally, by the time I got to him, I had got so tired of explaining to people that what I was experiencing wasn't normal that I took a video of, how much I was bleeding. And before I could finish my sentence with him, I walked in and I was like, I need to get checked because I've been experiencing irregular bleeding. He started writing on his prescription pad. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm writing you a prescription for birth control. You said you had, irregular bleeding. So we want to regulate your period. I said, no, that's not what I said. So, I took out the video. I showed him the video of how much I was bleeding. And then, he said, okay, we're going to do your exam. And once he did the exam, he said that my cervix was abnormal and enlarged, and he would send me for further testing. And upon further testing is how I found out.
Wow.
So
when you say, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. So, just for clarity, when you were saying the type of bleed, are you just referring to it being irregular, or was it like I guess more than normal, like compared to when you have your menstruation?
So, the first alarming part of bleeding was after being intimate with my husband. It was definitely not a normal amount of blood. And that's when I went to the ER. After they told me that everything was okay, and they were like, well, you just had your period 3 days ago, so maybe that's the reason. When it happened again, I knew that, okay, no, this is not right. Like, I'm not supposed to be bleeding. And after that, even if I wasn't intimate with my husband, I would just be bleeding. Like, it would be times that I would wake up in a pool of blood. I would be sitting on the toilet and bleeding for 45 minutes. It would just, I had to start wearing the diapers because I worked in a school at the time, in the elementary school, and I didn't want the kids to see me like bleeding. So I would just, where that's how much I was bleeding. It would be clots coming out that were very scary and alarming.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I told a different doctor, they kept telling me that was normal. And I was just kept telling them that that's not normal for me to be bleeding like that. At first, I thought it was maybe me starting menopause. So I was actually excited because I was like, maybe this is what happens right before it ends. Like, I'm excited.
Yeah.
I'm excited, because boy, you're a woman, you get tired of bleeding. Like, when is this going to stop? Like, when is this going to stop? But she told me that I wasn't in menopause range. So that just made it even more alarming that I was bleeding the way I was.
How old were you when you first started experiencing the symptoms?
I was 44 and it started in June of 2023.
Okay. So before that, were you getting like your regular pap smears though?
Yes. So I get a pap smear every year, even though now they tell you that you don't need it for every 3 years or whatever. Right. And I was still insistent anyway on getting them every year because I had been just so accustomed to getting them every year. So I still definitely got my pap smear almost every year around my birthday, which was November. So every year I would be like, yeah, it's time for my pap. So yeah, I've had abnormal cells before.
Right.
But it was never, anything else. They would tell me that I had fibroids or, like an enlarged cyst or something like that. Like when I was pregnant, I had fibroids, but, it was nothing ever serious. And my mom had fibroids as well. And she had a hysterectomy right after she had me. So that was just common in my family. So it was nothing ever, nothing
alarming.
Right.
Yeah. And so in a sense, it's like it's kind of came out of the blue then, if you know, for you to be regularly getting that. Now, so I'm assuming you didn't have any family history of cervical cancer.
No, ma'am. No, none at all.
That's really scary. And it sounds
scary.
Very frustrating just listening to you. I know so many times we as women in general have to advocate for ourselves. And I was just kind of curious if this affects Black women more or anything. Yes. According to the American Journal of Preventative Medicine, Black women are 30% more likely to develop cervical cancer and 60% more likely to die from it. But and that's more than non-Hispanic white women. And from what I was gathering, it's more so attributed to unequal care, access and prevention, and early detection and treatment. So, and I already know about like the high mortality rate when it comes to Black women, when it comes to childbirth in general. And I think it just kind of comes down to like us not being heard. And that sounds so frustrating that you know your body, you're a grown woman, you've been having your cycle for years, you ready for it to go.
Right.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it sounds like. Like she wasn't being heard and she's telling them what she's experiencing.
Yeah. Yes. So, it was very frustrating, especially when he started writing for birth control pills. Like that's the first thing a doctor will say. If you're saying that you have irregular periods, that's the first thing that they think. Like, okay, so we're going to regulate it. Like that's not what I said.
Yeah, like trying to fix it as opposed to tell me why this is happening. What changed in my body to make this start occurring? Like I want to know that.
Yeah, and even the fact to me, like you had to go to the step of making a video so someone could actually listen and try to help you figure out what is going on with your body.
Yes,
like that is crazy to me.
So did that make you change doctors because it didn't really seem like they was paying attention?
Yeah, absolutely. And even when I found out, nowadays you get your information in a chart. So my chart came back, of course, to my email. And the first thing that I saw in my chart that was alarming was mass. And every time you see mass, you automatically think, something is wrong. And I saw they had fibroids as well. So I didn't know if the mass was the fibroid, because that's what a mass means, is like a growth. So that's what I thought. I thought maybe the fibroids were the mass, but mass was not looking promising. So it took, even though I got my results through my chart, I didn't talk to the doctor until 2 weeks after that. So for 2 weeks, I was trying to figure out what the mass was and looking up Google, and just decided not to even look anymore. And when I finally got to this man, he said to me, I have good news and bad news. And he said, the bad news is that you have cervical cancer. And the good news is that you are right down the street from the best cancer hospital, and they will take care of you.
That's the good news, bro.
And he walked out of the door, and that was it.
Oh my God.
So he never explained my results to me. He never asked me if I was okay, if I needed anything, if I had any questions, if I rolled by myself, which I did. I can't, because I came to the doctor to get my results by myself. And
2 weeks later.
Yes, I was in shock.
And that's how you get it delivered to you.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, I sat there for a minute, and then I actually got up and looked outside, like, okay, did he really leave? Is he coming back? And the nurse was like, yeah, we're gonna the Levine Center will call you. And that was that.
It's like, that is a blow. I think sometimes medical professionals become so desensitized. I guess having to deliver that news on a regular basis. So for them, and it's not them, it's not their family members. So for them, it's just a everyday thing. Because I have that experience with a family member of mine, my father actually, and just the bedside manner is just non-existent. It is with the way that they deliver news, and it's just awful. So that, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. I know, as far as like affecting your family and your day-to-day life, as far as treatment, how did that go?
So I went to work the next day, and because I was still in shock, I went to work. And the Levine Center in Charlotte, I live in North Carolina. So the Levine Center in Charlotte called me while I was at work, and they told me that they had an immediate opening. So I left work and I went there, and my oncologist who I met, she told me what my results were, and she explained everything and what she thought. She said she saw a mass and she wanted to do a biopsy to make sure, but she told me that the doctor never should have said that, because, without a biopsy, they really don't know. So for it to be confirmed, she said that was her suspicion, and it wouldn't be confirmed unless she did a biopsy. So she did it right there in her office. But she took the time to explain. She also told me I told her that I never wanted to see that particular doctor ever again. And she told me I didn't have to. So, I felt a little better talking to her, because before she did any exam, before she did anything, she asked me if I was okay. And she explained what my results were, what she thought it was, and what would happen if it was what she said.
Okay, so once she did the biopsy, the results came back, then going forward, like, what took place?
So when she did the biopsy, we can now remind y'all, I was already bleeding. I was still bleeding. So when she did the biopsy, it aggravated the tumor more. And I ended up having to stay in the hospital for 2 days because it kept bleeding. So they had to do this procedure called packing. And basically it's where they take gauze and they put medicine on the end of it, and they insert it into your vagina, and they try to pack that area until the bleeding stops. However, for me, I kept bleeding through that. So I had to stay in the hospital. And I was there for 2 days, and then the bleeding stopped around Sunday night. So I got to go home. I went to work that next Monday, and, I started bleeding again. So I had to go back. So I ended up staying in the hospital a total of 10 days. And my treatment plan was supposed to be 35 rounds of external radiation, and then 6 rounds of chemo, and then 5 rounds of brachytherapy, which is internal radiation. But they ended up having to start my radiation in the hospital because I wouldn't stop bleeding. So I had to have several blood transfusions. At one point, my hemoglobin was down to 4. I would have to get transfusions twice a day. And then they started the external radiation to stop the bleeding.
Wow.
So how long did you, I guess, go through treatment? I don't know if you mentioned that already.
So that was November 2nd when I went and had the biopsy. That's also my husband's birthday, November 2nd. And on November 9th is when I was officially staged.
Okay.
And she told me I was stage 2, and she sat down and she said, I had to do a PET scan. And a PET scan is something that you get into this machine, and they do your whole body, and they put this dye in, and if wherever it lights up, that's where your cancer is.
Right.
So after the PET scan is where I was staged because of how big my tumor was. My tumor was 9.8 centimeters. And she told me stage 2. But when I looked at my paperwork, my chart, it was actually stage 3C. And I didn't find that out until a couple of months ago, actually. And I asked her why they didn't tell me that it was stage 3C, and why did she tell me stage 2?
Mm-hmm.
And she said because really, she said to her, she just wanted me to get the treatments done. It was already a blow enough just hearing that it was cervical cancer. And, she didn't want the stage to be even more alarming than the actual news. So she just didn't tell me about how advanced it was. The stage 3 came from how big my tumor was.
Okay.
And
so not necessarily how, so the size of the tumor doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the aggressiveness.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, I was stage 3C, and and that meant it didn't expand outside of my uterus, so it was still just my cervix, and that was it. But the tumor was big enough for the severity of it.
Okay. Where are you now as far as your treatment and everything?
So as of now, so that was November. My birthday is November 13th. And I was still in the hospital. So I spent my husband's birthday, my birthday, and my dad. All of our birthdays are in November, all in the hospital. So my radiation started in the hospital, but the rest of my treatments were outpatient. So after I got out of the hospital on the 16th, I was like, I'm leaving today, and that's that.
Yeah.
Once I got out of the hospital, I finished all the rest of my treatments outpatient. So I had to do radiation every day, Monday through Friday. I had the weekends off. I had chemo on Thursday, so I would have to go to the hospital at 6:00 in the morning for external radiation, and then after that, I would go to another hospital for chemo for 4 to 5 hours, and that was just on Thursday. So I finished my treatment, all of them, January 5th of last year, and as of April of last year, I was declared NED, which means no evidence of disease.
Okay.
Praise God. Oh my goodness.
Now, the HPV vaccine, because I was reading a little bit about that. Now, so has you ever received that vaccine?
I have not. No, I didn't, because I knew nothing about the HPV vaccine. My mom didn't know anything about the HPV vaccine. And the first I ever heard of it was when my daughter, she'll be 28 this year, when she was 11, they brought it up at her doctor's appointment. And they were like, hey, she can get this vaccine. And at the time, I said, well, what is it for? And she said, well, it's optional. They can get it now for when it'll be used for when it'll help her now for when she's sexually active. And when you're a parent of an 11-year-old, you're not thinking about them being sexually active. So she also told me that it was optional and it wasn't something that she needed for school. And then when I asked my mom, of course, my mom didn't know. None of my older cousins knew. So I was like, well, if it's optional and she doesn't need it for school and it's something she's going to need when she's that of age, then maybe that's something that she can do, when she gets older. And so I opted out. And they never explained why, she needed it and why that it would prevent cancer. None of that. So I didn't know anything about it. But now, once I did the research and once I went through everything I went through, I took my daughters, because I have 4 altogether. So I took my other daughters to get their HPV vaccine, and the nurse explained to them exactly why they needed it and why it was important.
Right. I remember as well. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but I was still going to my pediatrician. I was definitely probably around, 13 or older, maybe. And it was mentioned to my mom about that. And at the time, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't fully explained, but, and I don't remember if I got it then. I did get it, but I still never, it was just kind of one of those vaccines that they say this will help you later type of thing.
Right.
Being fully informed. But now as I've gotten older and more research has come out about it, I know more about it. But I was reading, according to the Cancer Research Institute, basically the HPV vaccine was kind of first introduced around 2006. And it was saying that the number of new cases of cervical cancer have dropped. So it's not, but obviously it's not the end all be all, but it can definitely help significantly to decrease your chances, I guess, of getting it.
Yes. And now you can get the HPV vaccine all the way up to age 45. you can get it as young as 9, and boys and girls can get it, and you can get it all the way up to the age of 45. And they were asking us if, I just turned 46, so I kind of just missed the mark. But basically, if you've never gotten the shot, or even if you have gotten the shot, a lot of parents that I know I talked to later on were like, they know they just got it because the person said that they needed it, not because, like, hey, just get this shot, or they felt like they were pressured to get it, not because they actually understood what was happening. And, a lot of parents said that they took their child to get it, but never took them back to get the second vaccine, or, the third dose, depending on how old you are. So it's important. And I think that providers definitely need to explain why it's important for them, and why, your children should get them, and why adults can get them now, because there's different strains that it protects from.
Right.
And that is something I didn't know. I was looking at this website, Northwestern Medicine, and it has on here that there's like 100 strains of HPV. And I had no idea. And
people don't talk about it as much because it's such a stigma. That's why we're speaking out about it now, because people think just because they hear it's sexually transmitted, that it has to do with penetration, and it doesn't. It's skin to skin as well.
I have 2 boys. And so my oldest one, he did get all of his shots, because I think he had to get like maybe 3 or 4 at the time. And so my youngest son, I know he had 1. So we're talking about this. So it definitely, tomorrow I'm going to call to see. I know he had at least 1, but I know tomorrow I'm calling to see if he got all of his shots now. So even though they didn't fully explain, I knew about HPV. I knew, they can cause cancer. Again, not knowing the different strains and all of this other stuff that I discovered from researching. And so I also want to bring this up too, because we're talking about the different strains, but also on this website by Northwestern Medicine, it was saying that the higher risk strains of HPV can also lead to other types of cancer in men and women, including cancers in the vaginal, vulva, penis, anus, rectum, and the throat.
Yes.
The actor that we
Michael
talked
Douglas.
about earlier.
Yeah, that reminds me of him. And I believe he thought it was throat cancer is what he thought. And then actually, I guess as time went on, he found out that it was tongue cancer. And he said that he got that from, I guess, the HPV virus. So, and that was back in 2013, I think. So I know things have come a long way since then. As far as now, like, what is your day-to-day after, being a survivor now? I thought I saw on the group that you have like a group or a foundation or something like that you work with.
I do work with Survivor, and Survivor is spelled with a C, Cervivor. Sorry, Cervivor. And the woman that started that, she was very young when she was diagnosed with cervical cancer. And at the time, it was nobody talking about it, when, you only hear a lot about breast cancer. And everybody goes hard for breast cancer month. That's all you see. Everything is pink, and that's all you really hear about. So she wanted to change that, and that's why she started this nonprofit organization. And I found out about Survivor after I went through all of my treatments, and they kind of became the support group. And I've gone to 2 different things that they hosted, and one was a retreat that I went to in May, and then the other one was Survivor School, where you kind of learn how to talk and advocate and become a patient advocate. And I did that, and I became a Survivor graduate in September in Seattle. So that's the nonprofit that I am with. But I also started my own called Getting Good with Your Health, and it's a traveling health fair pop-up shop contributing to a healthier mind, body, and spirit. And it's basically going into different states and hosting health fairs so that they can get this information in their community.
Okay.
And can you touch on that a little bit as far as like things that can be done?
A lot of people always feel like, oh, if you eat the right things, or if you cut out this, or, because the main thing I hear about all the time is sugar kind of feeds the cancer. I think that's one of the reasons why I've been so resilient in as far as recovering afterwards. I'm not really like super healthy. Like, I'm not on a health kick. The entire time that I was going through treatment, I couldn't eat anything. So it's not like I was super healthy, and I love sugar. I have a mean sweet tooth. But the whole time that I was on my treatment, I could not eat anything sugar wise. So it was crazy. Everything changed after that. Like it's certain things that I still can't eat, like pork. I had to cut pork out. It definitely wasn't something that I wanted to do, or was not planning on doing, but my body my body rejects it now. So after I started to heal and got better and think that I noticed that things were always, make me sick. Pork and eating eggs were the two things that kept making me sick regardless, even though, I wasn't currently on any medication anymore or anything like that. Those are the two things that I still can't eat now. It definitely makes you more conscious as to what you're putting in your body. It definitely made me, like I said, that was something that I wasn't ever planning on giving up, because breakfast is actually my favorite meal of the day. So
mine too.
But now it's just weird that I can't have eggs and I can't have pork at all. Like it makes me violently sick. So
okay. All right. All right. Well, that's all we have for today. I want to thank Lindsay again for joining us. Lindsay, where can we find out more information about your organization that you were talking about?
Getting Good with Your Health. I do have an Instagram page. It's called Getting Good with Your Health. I have a Facebook page called Getting Good with Your Health. It is up and coming. I just finished doing a health fair here in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I'm actually headed to Houston on Thursday to do another one there.
Okay, great. All right.
Awesome.
The episode. I mean, y'all gotta let us know, what did y'all think about it? I think she did a good job. I think she did. I think my team did a fantastic job. I want to thank y'all so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe. And also, if you have something that you want to share, don't be afraid to come on and talk about it. We welcome you with open arms. As long as you be respectful and everything like that, we don't have no problem with you coming on and telling your story. But again, thank you so much for listening. I am Swaver. This is the Opinionated Facts Media Group podcast. And until next time, peace.